I need you to trust me. One last time.
At some point, we gotta start calling it Mission Improbable, as Ethan Hunt seems to be, well, indestructible. I'm not gonna call that an issue, and while the final reckoning is definitely a satisfying send-off, probably isn't the send-off, it may not be quite as polished.
Asshole.
How many franchises can be as consistent as Mission Impossible? Not really any bad ones, part 2 may be questionable, and these last 2 movies are definitely no exception. Obviously, Dead Reckoning was part 1, this is the conclusion, and while it does do mostly everything right and deliver a satisfying finale, some elements maybe could have used a bit more attention. Being a direct sequel, the entity is still the main focus, and artificial intelligence, and the mysterious antagonist Gabriel wants to control it. So with the help of Grace, Benji, new recruits Paris and Theo, somewhat enemies in the previous movie, they must retrieve the core module from the sunken Russian submarine, and to do so he must convince the president to loan him an aircraft carrier. There's also the time dilemma, as the entity is taking over the nation, and not everybody is in agreement, such as Briggs, Theo's ally in the last movie. But given Ethan Hunt does not literally save the world in every movie, kinda like what Bond used to do, the stakes do feel a lot higher. This leads to some real effective action set pieces, and despite being the longest runtime yet, I don't think the pacing is an issue. I do think Dead Reckoning was paced a bit better, and probably the better movie, but in the same vein, this one had the harder task. You gotta consider the build-up, characters already established. It is a risk connecting to movies like this. Like I said, it does for the most part pay off. I say for the most part because issues do come with this setup, and I think the biggest one has to be anybody who isn't Tom Cruise. He is the focus, the attention is on him, and I kinda wish the rest had done more. Benji and Luther are fine, they're franchise staples, but Grace could have literally just been anybody, maybe even a whole new character, and it wouldn't have affected anything. Her role was way more interesting in the last movie, not really any growth here, she was at least given things to do, but if you compare this to Swan in the last 2 Daniel Craig James Bond movies, she actually became more interesting in No Time to Die. I think I'd prefer this movie to that, but it's no excuse for lack of development. Same goes for Paris and Theo. Paris is given a few comedic lines in French, she supposedly really wants revenge on Gabriel, but it doesn't go anywhere. Theo is even less interesting, given he was Briggs' ally, he really could have been, but despite being on opposite sides, they don't say anything to each other even when they're in the same vicinity. You know, standing next to each other. You'd think one of them would have said something. Again, almost a 3-hour movie, I wish they'd been given some time, but honestly, they're there because they have to be there.
Positively shocking.
Then we have Gabriel, the antagonist, who was real fun, real charismatic, I'm quite fond of him, but you don't see him in much of this. Given he's probably the best character, that's real disappointing, because when he's on screen, he's real damn fun. I guess he didn't know what to do with everybody, and I suppose that's the issue with this 2-part setup. There's a sense of it's the same deal aside from the saving the world premise. The formula does get a bit old, but at the same time, a lot of these set pieces do stand out. The finale is fantastic, similar to the helicopter chase in Fallout, only with planes, but the highlight definitely has to be the diving bit. It's a real suspenseful, climactic sequence full of shocking moments. Granted, it's set up in a way you know it's not gonna go well, but given what's at stake, it does add a lot to this. I really enjoyed it, not that many scenes in the franchise stand out like this, and given it's a solid franchise, that's saying something. I'll admit I'm not the biggest Tom Cruise fanatic, I much prefer him in movies like American Made, or even Edge of Tomorrow, when he's not made to be so serious. And let's face it, stuff like this and Top Gun Maverick aren't so much good because of him. That's not the point here, but I've never really bought him in movies like this. Maybe it's just me.
Oh, that does it. I will sue you!
This movie is also quite big on references, stuff that relates to old movies, and I really like how they do this. They don't overdo it, which they could have easily done, and there are a lot of things that were kind of shocking to see brought up again. Doing that right is respectable in this day and age, so let's get into what those things are. Meaning, spoilers. One of the things I like the most is Briggs actually being Jim Phelps' son, who was the leader way back in the first movie, played by Jon Voight. Unfortunately, it is a bit undermined by him not being in much of the movie, or even the last movie, but I do love this connection. Literally everybody has seen the famous break-in scene to the CIA headquarters in the first movie. It does not get more iconic, and Rolf Saxon reprises that role in this movie. How amazing is that? That's so fucking cool. I love how they brought him back. And unlike some other characters, he does get more development. He was exiled to Alaska because of the incident, but he's okay with it, even somewhat grateful as his job sucked, I guess. And the references and nods to old movies don't end there. You may have noticed me not mentioning Luther too much, literally a franchise staple appearing in every movie, and you may have guessed why that is. He dies in this through an act of sacrifice, and I don't like it that much. I think it's because it's predictable. I don't know why it's predictable, but for some reason, I expect it. Maybe the longest lasting character to ever die in one of these movies, but it doesn't have the shock value it could have had. That's an issue with any character death in this franchise because the attention is on Ethan Hunt. So killing off a franchise mainstay doesn't have the impact you'd think. As for the climax, it's great. Almost everybody does something. The fight on the biplane is real good, and Gabriel is given a hilariously satisfying death. I'm not gonna lie, for a moment I actually thought they were gonna kill off Ethan in an attempt to imitate another franchise we won't talk about, but then there wouldn't be more movies, so again, indestructible he is. Like always, happy ending, everybody goes their separate ways until part 9, but Ethan Hunt does possess the entity in the end, and there is something terrifying about that, because, you know, he is Tom Cruise. So the final reckoning is probably not the final movie, but if it was, it would be decent enough. The pacing is good, as were the set pieces. I don't mind the long runtime, but definitely not the best installment. It does have a few issues, and some of them are a bit frustrating, but nothing too serious that I wouldn't wholeheartedly recommend it. It may be on the lower half of what is a very solid franchise, but that isn't a bad thing, so let me know what you think down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, please share it. The like button is down below. Subscribing is an option too, as is the gaming channel for the same content with games. Link in the description. I'm the Analyst, and remember kids, Mission Improbable. That's a nice ring.